This is the Trusting Our Men interview series, where I explore and unpack what is still stopping us from cultivating trust, partnership, and safety with our men. Join me and my co-host Madelyn Moon as we have difficult conversations with conscious men in hopes of building a bridge of more compassion and understanding. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Trusting Our Men again. I'm Nadia, your host for this interview series, and I am so honored today to have with us Ken Fried. I want to share a little bit about the work that he does in the world and welcome him here today into the chat. So Ken is formally educated as a mechanical engineer with work experience at 2 Fortune 500 aerospace companies. Ken now tackles the problems that keep leaders from standing as the heroes of their own lives and those they serve. With his background in high-performance coaching, shadow work, systemic family constellation therapy, cleansing, fasting, meditation, and plant medicine, Ken masterfully weaves ancient science with modern wisdom as a means of liberating oneself from the role of obsolete character in an outdated story. An alchemist of the heart and Sherpa of the spirit, Ken assists conscious leaders to break free from the shackles of shame and struggle that keeps them bound to suffering, so they can claim their power to choose and create rather than chance the life they live and the impact they make. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Nadia.
So I just want to start off by sharing with everyone tuning in the profound impact that this book that you have written called Penis Power had on me. I just finished reading it and I was moved to tears. I emailed you being like, oh my God. And I was absolutely just inspired by the amount of courage it takes to talk about a topic that is very taboo, that is very unspoken of. And it felt like such a perfect match to bring you on here for the series, where we are specifically trying to have, or at least attempt to have, these conversations that feel a little bit more difficult, that feel a little bit more uncomfortable. And one of these topics, what you speak to in this book, and I'm going to have you share a little bit about your story and sort of what you speak to in a moment. But what you speak to here it's so unspoken of that I didn't even think about it until it came to the forefront for me. So I wanted to start off by sharing how incredibly impressed and inspired I am by the courage it takes and the confidence to really be like, here's my story in the world. So I'd love to have you just share a little bit with everyone your story of getting to this place of, really guiding people towards their truth after being in such a different world, mechanical engineering, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the story basically is a sequence of experiences that I share from my childhood all the way into present time that are essentially laying out the story of the shame and inferiority and insecurity and low self-esteem and low confidence that tormented me for the majority of my life. And the journey of, let me show you what happened to me that created this deep shame centered around my genitals, and how over time I was able to unravel myself from that. And then not just unravel myself from it, but then the yearning and the calling of my heart that said, you need to share this story. And how that was part of the story, being able to come out and say, look at what I experienced. And here it is for you to read and be impacted and be brought to tears like you were.
Yeah, and you know, I think part of what moved me, other than your courage in this, was I felt such a resonance and such a parallel with so many women's stories. So as an embodiment coach who primarily works with anyone who identifies as a woman, I've been working a lot around the messages of shame. Like, we're peeling off our own set of messages around, you know, what it means to be, you know, a very sexy woman, or what it means, you know, to show up in your power. And here I was really confronted with such a parallel story in a man's experience. And it really brought to light, I guess, a little bit of a blind spot, or just like a lack of awareness around the fact that, oh my God, this is the same pain that my clients, and probably, you know, and myself, have gone through. A lot of my sisters are also happening to men in my life, but it's even more silenced. It's even more secretive, because I think there is a little bit of this like culture of sisterhood where we can come together and speak to that. Whereas versus with men, there's been a lot more of like, you do it on your own. You know, men's circles is not like the common average thing that every dude, you know, in the US does. It's just a very small subculture that we happen to reside in. And so it just really broke my heart. And also, of course, was inspiring, because ultimately there's this power, this reclamation that comes with being, you know, being true to the heartbreak and being true to the entire journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's interesting because for me, what was worse than the shame specifically that was programmed into me about the size of my penis, worse than the shame was the fact that I lived with the belief that this was so dark and secretive that I couldn't share this with anyone. There was no one. This was like locked up, lock after lock after lock, and there was no talking to anyone about this. And so I lived in my own little prison of my own creation for so many years, working through the layers, thinking and believing that it was unsafe to ask for support. And I didn't even know who I would ask for support from. And it wasn't just specifically about my cock. It was specifically, how do I unravel so that I can open up and be seen and let these deepest core wounds inside of me be seen. And so it wasn't just the journey of overcoming the shame. It was the journey of being able to open up and realize that it's safe to be seen, which is classic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to use this as a sort of segue into the more collective perspective here, because that's really what these conversations are about, right? Is this idea of how do we come back to a place of bridging the gap, bridging the miscommunication, bridging all this sort of lack of safety that has been coming up for us in our system. And I'm curious for you right now, with the particular unique lens that you've got, when you look at the world of gender relations, the current state of affairs between, you know, men and women, what feels really true and real to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in this moment, what's true for me, and I use my own experience as a reflection of what's happening in the collective. And if I speak to my experience right now is about unifying the masculine and the feminine within. And when I look out and when I interact with women, for example, or I interact with other men, I'm looking at the reflection of either the integrated or the unintegrated masculine or feminine dynamics that are being reflected to me in the other. And so where I'm resisting another, I'm resisting myself. And where I'm embracing another, I'm embracing myself. So I'm always sort of assessing my relations as a means to inform me of where the edges are inside of myself.
So based on that concept, then, if we are othering someone, what does it mean about ourselves?
It's a great question. So speaking from my own experience, if I'm othering another, then there's still work to be done to access and meet parts of myself that I haven't met yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating. This theme has come up with so many of these interviews, the internal integration. And it sounds like there's just this, this collective pull to balance and to wholeness, which makes sense. I mean, that's the natural gravitation, right? Like, why would we not be moving towards wholeness? And yet it's showing up in these really interesting shadow ways where, you know, just like when we are doing internal work with ourselves, we bump up against the fear, against the inner critic voice, against any resistance. The same seems to be happening on a more collective level. So socially, it's like, it feels like more than ever, so much just energy of instant defensiveness and being offended and aggression. And there's just like even a lot of violence, like the energy of violence in a lot of communication amongst people. And I know there was so much of a feeling of that the men felt on their end, you know, throughout Me Too. And there's, you know, you can argue both ways that I don't think there's one umbrella version, but, you know, there's the men who were like, oh my God, this is like, we're all going to be punished. And now the women have all the power. You know, there was this fear, which was a little like, okay, well, you finally have to actually pay attention to the consequences of your actions after being, you know, living in a system where you were sort of given like a pass for everything. So on the one hand, they're, you know, I can see how women are like, well, you need to just like, everyone, you know, the guys got to relax a little and finally listen. And on the other hand, I can also understand the experience of men, which is part of why the impetus for the series is like, okay, but we're really like the good men who have good intentions and just don't know, like, what are the rules now? Like, teach me, what do I do? I don't know how to do it. And the only response that I noticed was, you know, all of them were really dysfunctional trauma responses in the collective. Either, okay, we go super, you know, aggressive and outward, or we completely retract and go back into our own little hole and don't flirt with anyone and don't try to, like, because it's not safe anymore to flirt with anyone or to do anything. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that whole pattern.
Yeah, there's so much there. Even until recent times, I've been aware inside of myself, meeting empowered, conscious women and feeling like it's unsafe. Even though they're telling me it's safe, I'm aware of dynamics that are playing out inside of myself that say it's not safe. And so I really appreciate what you're sharing, because while the Me Too movement was happening, and while these collective discussions are happening, I see them every day on my Facebook wall, I have taken the stance of actually being more withdrawn and just noticing the conversations, noticing the reactions, noticing people's perspectives. And for me, the focus has been on what's arising inside of myself, because if this is all a reflection, then let me quiet down, let me sit, let me reflect on what's arising in me and begin to notice the internal dialogue and the internal dynamics that I have the opportunity to sort out, either on my own or with support. And for me, it's both. And then enter the stage, so to speak, when I feel called to. And as an example, playing that way for me resulted in writing Penis Power, a really profound story. And it was through my own diving into myself and exploring what was arising inside of myself through the reflection of the collective that I was able to tap into the courage required to share such a profound story. And I think there's a space for every man and every woman to actually go so deep within that there's something that wants to emerge, a truth that wants to be spoken.
Yeah.
That impacts the collective and creates a space in the collective. And, you know, the final thing I'll say is just, you know, like the whole 4-minute mile analogy, like somebody breaks the 4-minute mile, and now everyone's running the 4-minute mile. I think there's way showers that are watching, noticing what's happening and dropping in and saying, boom, now I'm going to present this into the collective. and it's going to calibrate and recalibrate and reorient everyone so that new conversations and new dynamics can be illuminated, so that the same process can happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about power and confidence, because this is such a big piece of your journey and the work that you're doing with penis power. And, you refer to the virus of inferiority on the page there for Seize Your Sword. And that really stuck out to me because I started to reflect on my own personal experiences and all the times that I felt pain and hurt as a result of, certain actions by a man, whether it's as simple as an inappropriate comment in the workplace, all the way to forced sex, from everything from ghosting a date to a really, violent breakup. That no matter where it was along the spectrum, when I really bring it back to, okay, what was the source of all of this? It usually, I can trace it back. And of course, this is an assumption I'm making about the experience of the man, as he's, it's not a dialogue I had. So I will say that little disclaimer there. However, based on my experience, it seems like 99% of it is a low confidence or a sense of inferiority that led them to these different actions. So it had me thinking, okay, so if this is my experience, and let's just assume that my connection is a valid one, this connection between their actions and this lack of confidence that they had, or a sense of inferiority, that means that so much of my pain would, I'm realizing there's a little bit of in that argument, because it takes, I want to be I want to also hold responsibility for my own pain in all of this. And I think that what I'm getting to is that the men, if they feel and are connected to their confidence and their power, there's a much smaller chance that they would cause this sort of pain onto myself and possibly other women. And so based on that logic, assuming this is all correct, that means that there is a lot of value to getting men to feel more confident about themselves, and to help them really peel away the messages that they get around what power is and how to actually have confidence. Does that feel true to you, or do you feel like I totally am making way too many connections?
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're sharing, and speaking to what's between the lines of what you're saying, to me, I think there's a relationship between confidence or lack thereof and objectification. So if I have low confidence, as I once did, I looked out and women and men were objectified. Whether this hot girl is too hot for me, or looking at a man and seeing the size of his cock in a porn video and just seeing his cock and his body and not seeing that there's a man who's living behind that, whatever it was, as I was in that debilitated and disempowered state where I was riddled with low confidence, I looked out and saw everything as an object that I compared to myself. And so through that, I think, if I take that and bring it a few steps ahead, as I came to embody my confidence and really owned who I was and the power of me as a man and the beauty of me and my uniqueness as a man, then there was nothing to objectify anymore. There's less to objectify, because I'm whole and complete and in love with myself. And everyone else is just a reflection of me. And so why would I do harm to another? Why would I objectify a woman or a man? Because I'm only objectifying myself.
I love this connection, because I know, having read your story, and I'm sure a lot of people tuning in will be excited to read it too. There was a certain experiences that you describe in the book that had you objectified at a very young age? And had you, and, you know, it might have been for medical purposes or something else. It wasn't necessarily sexual objectification, but this feeling of having had that experience early on will naturally then program in you that same outward perspective of, oh, let me scan other people the same way that I was sort of scanned or had the experience of being scanned. Does that feel true?
Absolutely. Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Many experiences that I shared in there, and there's others that I haven't shared where that was exactly the case. I was objectified, and so I was in a way calibrated to objectification consciousness. I'm making that word up right now.
Great. It's new. Let's trademark it.
Yeah, exactly. And so for so many years, I was operating in that realm of consciousness. And it had a massive impact on my capacity to show up in the world, to be in relationship with women, to be in relationship with men. I lived a very isolated life that was riddled with fear and insecurity because I thought so low of myself.
Yeah. I also want to share that, you know, the power and confidence piece just is it just continues to get more and more, I don't know, it's just like a bigger theme in my experience with men. So I came out of a life partnership about over a year ago, and have been, you know, slowly dating.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed is the incredible difference that just someone's confidence makes. So, you know, sure, I have a physical type and sure, I have certain preferences, but it is way lower in terms of the, I guess, I don't know, like criteria than someone showing up and just being like, yeah, I've done the work to feel really good about myself, and I'm showing up to straight up ask you out, and I think that you're beautiful. You know, like just that confidence, I think as you get older and with experience, it really becomes the most attractive quality any man can have, or it's really any human, but I'm just speaking as a woman, you know, currently dating men. It's like that they can be just the most gorgeously sculpted human, and if they come to me and they're not treating me with respect, or they don't feel like, there's just this wavering energy, it's an instant, like my body goes you know. And then there could be someone who maybe I wouldn't instantly notice, but who shows up and is like, just, I am here and I'm paying attention to you, and I am like really confident that even if you say no, I'm good with that, you know, as a man. I'm like, holy shit, you're the hottest thing ever. And even if I may ultimately end up saying no, I still have so much like true, like real respect and reverence for this human, for being so connected. And my sense is that this is the piece that a lot of guys haven't really figured out yet, at least in the interrelational, like the, you know, the dating world. It's like, I don't know. I know that for you, this was such a challenge for so long. So I'd love to like get a man's perspective on this.
I love what you're sharing. And I want to say thank you, because that is, again, the affirmation of what the truth is, not what the distortion is. And so many men are living in a distorted reality, as I was, where it was about the size of the dick, and it was about how you perform sexually, and it was about like how you take her out, and what you do and what you say, and playing the game, so to speak, and engineering some kind of experience. And I love what you're sharing, because it hits the mark, and that has been my experience too. I understand both ends of the spectrum. I was in the spectrum of what you're describing, living in distortion, where I didn't have the confidence. I would try to play the game, but it would be felt immediately. And so rather than confronting what that brought up inside of me, I just wouldn't engage with women. And I would sabotage experiences with women, or I would avoid women, or I wouldn't call women back, or I would just find a way to not engage with women. And what has evolved and where I'm at now is exactly what you're describing. For me, the journey is the path of vulnerability. Doesn't matter if I'm dating anyone or not, or in relationship or not, it's the path of vulnerability. And wherever there's an edge to be more vulnerable, I lean into that edge. And that is exactly what you're describing. It's all about me, in the sense that if I'm engaging with you as a beautiful woman and things are coming up that are causing me to not show up in my fullest power, then that's something for me to look at. And it's like, wow, thank you. If nothing else came of this, thank you for showing me a part of myself where there's work to be done. And as I've done that again and again and again for years and years and years, there's a deep pervading confidence that I have to show up. And as I say on the landing page, men, did you know if you treat a woman, if you're confident and treat a woman with respect, she won't care what size your dick is. I say that from experience. It's not like I'm just saying that. It's like, yeah, I know, because what women want, and it's what you're saying, is a man who's confident with himself and all of himself, whatever he has.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, again, you know, I always like to emphasize that obviously there's a place that we can be in, we can hold two truths. So there's the truth of the historical context of, yes, there's been certain privilege that has, you know, that it's not an equal level playing field for men and women. And at the same time, so we can be like, yes to that. And of course, there's 100 other variables with privilege, but just in terms of gender. And then there's the piece of, but really, ultimately, we are having such similar experiences under a system, you know, the patriarchy, that is really creating these like toxic, repressive messaging that we are all sort of prisoners of. And I look at everything that you're sharing about your experience as a man, and I think, oh my God, there's a parallel here to the women. You know, it's like one of my mentors, Sheila Kelly, she speaks about authentic versus presentational sexy when we're speaking about women and liberating them back into their like erotic essence. And, you know, to me, it's like another way to say this is like primal and manufactured sexuality. And it sounds like, you know, with whether it's pornography or even like just like the chiseled, you know, abs, like I don't know, I'm thinking of like Calvin Klein. I don't even know if Calvin Klein exists anymore, but like I think back in the day when I consumed magazines and it was like all these like male Calvin Klein models with their like little, you know, their abs and stuff and their underwear, you know, it was like there was a lot of continues to be so much objectification around men's bodies as well, and around you know, and pressure for men to go to the gym and look a certain way and be a certain size, whether it's a specific, you know, part of your body or just your body as a whole. And so I think that there's a lot more overlap in our experiences, and then there actually is a difference in terms of our sexuality. And I see so many women, same thing, clenching and sort of clamming up and not putting themselves out there because, you know, it might be like, I don't know, I've got one breast bigger than the other. And that really, you know, makes me feel self-conscious. Or it might be that, you know, there's something else that they feel, whether it's just their weight or gosh, it could be anything, right? But once it becomes that thing that you fixate on as like, oh, this is the reason why no one would be into me, you automatically close up and decide, I'm not even going to put myself out there. And so really, we're all going through the exact same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. What comes up for me as you're sharing that is that if I had one prayer relative to what we're talking about, it would be that every man and woman and child for that matter, at some point has a pure, loving, compassionate mirror of another human to reflect to them their beauty and their perfection. For as a man to stand with a woman who has one breast smaller than the other and say, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, to trip out the circuitry of distortion that says that something is wrong, because you're not seeing yourself as you are, you're seeing yourself just as the body. And I know this well because I speak about it in Penis Power with the first woman I made love with, where she reflected to me that your cock is great. And it was like, wait, what? And I had to like go through the journey of realizing that I was living in a distorted reality. And what a blessing that was, and all the blessings that have come since from women who've reflected different facets of my own beauty, and the calibration that occurs in me. So now I can go out and I'm constantly reflecting, and I say this with humility, the beauty, because the true beauty is beyond the form. And for one who's done the work and who does the work, we can see that.
Yes.
You know, I can see, you can see, we can see the beauty that's beyond the body. And I love, for example, when I come across videos of people that don't have arms and legs, for example, and they're doing this greatness in the world, or people who've been burnt, you know, 4th degree burns head to toe, and they're connected to their beauty of their spirit. It's like, yes, let's be reminded that the true beauty is beyond form.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a bit of a, you know, we have some very interesting contradictory messages that come up in our current system, which clearly is not healthy, and we're working on restructuring. But on the one hand, there is this, as you're speaking to it, like so much emphasis on the form and on the body. And yet on the other hand, we live in a culture where connection to your body is not really revered. It's not really valued. Connection to your mind and like being successful. You speak to this in your story too. It's like, okay, you were like, I'm just going to focus on being really smart and like succeeding that way, which again is my story and the story of so many women that I guide, where it's like, okay, there's at one point in life where you realize that you create the story, right? That, oh, your body is against you in some shape or form. Your body is an obstacle to your dreams. And so you go, okay, well, you know, peace out on the body. Like, I'm going to work with my mind, which is the one thing that I can control, that I can hone. And then, you know, you look at the world around you and it continues to reconfirm that, like, yes, actually we prefer that you are someone who makes spreadsheets and is an engineer and a lawyer and a whatever and as opposed to, you know, someone who maybe is teaching about sacred body wisdom or teaching about connection to your soul, right? So like there's such a there's a lot of mixed messages that can really mess with our minds around, like, on the one hand, it's like pay attention to your body, but manage it like a project, chisel it into like the way that we're showing you it needs to be, as opposed to just a more authentic connection to what it feels like to be in your body. So there's this really focus of like outward in, maybe as I'm saying this, I'm realizing, yeah, it feels more that there's like a yes to, so the socially there's this yes to look at your body, pay attention to your body, but from the outside in, so you're managing it, as opposed to this inward and out, like what does it feel like to be in your body, right? So for you, for example, I imagine once you started to connect to your sensuality and like the actual sensations of what it's like, once you were intimate, I'm sure you were like it's a whole nother connection.
Yeah. It's profound.
Yeah.
And it only grows the deeper I go into my body. I have a very elaborate somatic meditation practice, and really studying, you know, different forms of somatic work to access the body and free the body, not just like free it to move, but free it of the distortions of the mind that are being carried in the tissue of the body. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, so that my body can be liberated to just be.
Yeah. Yeah. What is one myth that you would like to debunk around sexuality? Men's experience of sexuality?
That's a good question. I think there's something around, speaking from my own experience and men that I've spoken to be desirous of a woman, you know, to look at her and see the beauty of her form and to be desirous of that. There's something for me around allowing space, like you're speaking, to both can exist simultaneously. That desire can exist. The desire to ravage, for example, can exist, and it can come from a place of love. Meaning that, yes, most men out in the world today, consensus reality, see women and they objectify women. But just because I may be objectifying or being perceived as objectifying a woman doesn't mean that I'm only seeing her as an object. Does that make sense?
100%. So what I'm hearing here is that there's like, there's sort of a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of, oh, okay, if there's an impulse to like, you know, jump someone in, you know, a consensual way, that there's now, because we're so in this, like, I think as women in this like trauma spell of like, this, you know, is it safe? There's an automatic assumption that it's not connected to the heart, and that it's dangerous. When in fact, there's two different ways in which that same impulse could be happening. One is from a love place, right? From the heart. Like, you are just the most gorgeous woman ever, and I just want to take you and claim you and like love you and penetrate you, right? And then there's another version that, and I would say, just going back to the first version, the other pieces, there's probably, and I'm guessing, a desire for union, a desire for connection, versus I think with the other less functional version, or not less, dysfunctional version, it's more, there's an otherness going back, there's this objectification, there's a disconnection, and there's sort of like, I want to dominate in such a way that doesn't come from a place of heart. It really comes from a place of asserting your manhood, or finding a way to connect to like masculinity because there's no other way in which you can.
Yeah. I think there's a subtle difference between like, I want to take you, I want to take you. You know, one being like the conquistador who like takes what he wants. Right. And then the other being like a heart-centered man who like is desirous, not just of the form and of the beauty, but of the opportunity to connect deeply.
Yeah. And I think this is where so much of the mix-up is happening, and a lot of the controversy is happening. It's like, you know, we're sort of looking at it just from the outside. So it's like with anything else in life, it's like if you just look at an action and you're just looking at the surface level action, it's like, that's not really enough. You have to look at the context, the motivation, the consequence. Like, there's so many other pieces involved. And so I think just the idea of a man claiming or ravishing sexually a woman, if you just take it at face value, it's going to feel like, and I think this is what's happening with the response of the men to Me Too, is there was just this like, okay, well, we're just going to not do anything. Let's flatline completely. Let's go asexual. It's the only way that our careers won't get busted. Like, I'm just not even going to try, right? There's been a lot of response quietly, privately, because no one wants to talk about it. In that sense, because a lot of the men came to me saying that, like, I'm just checking out. I'm like, no, please don't check out. Like, us as women, we don't want you to check out. We actually want you to step into consciousness more. We want you to listen. We want you to be aware of what might come up. For us, I want you to ask questions. Like, we don't want you to check out. And we want to be more in union, not more disconnected. And I think that, you know, I can understand also why there's a little bit of a from the men's side, because there is a certain profile of women who may be still processing a lot of her trauma, and who may be, you know, going, okay, finally, I've been oppressed this long. I now get a little bit of the power. I'm going to take the same, I'm going to sort of unconsciously do what you did to me back onto you, right? This is sort of this is like when two couples are fighting, and I mean, not two couples, one couple, but two people in a couple are fighting. And like, initially, if you're not in your most evolved, like resource place, you're just like, you know, and that's like what's happening collectively. But if we just take a moment to breathe and to bring our nervous system back down to a neutral place, there's this realization that no one's going to win if everyone retracts, or if now the women take power and go, okay, yeah, we're just going to walk around and ruin everyone's careers. Like, that's not really what we want. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so funny, but it's unspoken, but I believe what is inspiring that, you know, pullback for men is the thought, completely unconscious, of when am I going to be castrated? Because it's coming.
Oh my God. Say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is what has lived inside of me until recent times, working through it, noticing it, is that conscious woman, empowered woman, any woman for that matter, I open up, heart-centered man, I'm coming from love, I'm coming from the highest expression of who I know myself to be in this moment, which includes the knowing that I'm not perfect and that there's still work to be done for me to fully activate and live into the templates of the divine masculine. So I'm coming with all of that, and I'm being received, but I'm feeling the tension that you're describing. And it's not necessarily like sexual tension or polarity. It's the tension of this woman at some point is going to cut my balls off. And in my vulnerability and in my raw authenticity and in my most tenderness, my most tender state, I am going to be castrated. And it's not worth it. It's not worth the risk. So what do? I hold back, I shut down, I pull back, I don't play the game anymore, I don't interact with women, I come up with reasons why, but fundamentally it's because I'm afraid of the moment that the castration occurs.
And what, can you give an example of what a woman would have to do or say for you to feel castrated?
That's a good question.
I feel like it's happening, and lots of times we're unconsciously doing it as women. And obviously we'd like to not do that.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I could say what it would be like, the castration, but I could speak of what it feels like when the castration doesn't feel
Great.
good.
Yeah.
And I feel that's exactly what you're doing in this webinar series, is exactly that. When I, as a man, for me personally, as Ken, I look out and I see all the conversations happening between men and women that are very heated and intense. And I wonder what it, like for me, maybe I'm naive, and it's very possible I am naive. I look and I'm like, why are these conversations even happening? For me as a man, I feel safe in the space that you're creating here, because you're actually willing to give us as men the benefit of the doubt, to give me in all the work that I've done, sharing my story, knowing that there's still so much for me to unravel and resolve to come into divine masculine energy. And I'm on my own journey still you're willing to see my perspective, embrace me, ask me questions, engage with me. And rather than be threatened or want to point and defy or blame me as a man for what I've done, I know what I have done as a man in my life, and I'm aware of what men have been doing for centuries. And that doesn't change the fact that I am a man who comes from a very heart-centered place, and I'm highly aware. And all I'm wanting is to be received, just like women are wanting to be received. We all want to just be received.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems to me, and I think this is a beautiful place for us to land in our conversation today, is that, again, we just continue to be asked to switch paradigms from one that's very like sort of binary and like it's this or that, you know, to one where we can hold different truths. And I think that there is these two truths of, on the one hand, yes, we can acknowledge on a more collective social level the fact that yes, we're still, or we're at the end, hopefully the end of the final chapter of the patriarchy, I'm hoping, and we will create a system that's going to be a lot more loving to everyone, hopefully, but that there has been a history of that, and there has been certain rights given to certain populations and certain people, and some that have gotten sort of the shitty end of the stick. And at the same time, there's another truth, and that truth is that we are all one, and we are all the same, and we have more in our human experience that unites us than we have that differentiates us, even though the system continues to try to keep us away from each other and against each other and sort of othering each other, because that's what the system really thrives on, right? And so if we can come to this place of acknowledging both what is and then also what can be, to me, that overlap of our humanity and these, we all know in sort of the self-development world that when you pull back the layers, like everything is about one or two different things, and we all have that, and that actually is more important. And if we can focus on that to unite us, will be a lot just more of a win-win situation for everyone than if we continue to look at, okay, well, we didn't get that for 700 years, and you got that for however many years, and you need to stop talking and just listen now, and you need to, and it's like, great. And then everyone walks away at the end of the night, no one's having sex, and it sort of sucks.
Yeah, one final thing I'd like to share from what you're saying is that the depth that I'm able to receive you as a woman, or women in general, for me to descend into your experience, to actually quiet my story and my inner dialogue down enough to receive you, and to receive you deeper and deeper and deeper. That's what I as a man want as well. And the deeper that I go into your experience as a woman and receive that, the more confronting that may be to the dialogue and the scripts that I'm running about women. And that's risky to the identity that is identified with those stories and scripts. And vice versa, for a woman to receive a man, for me to say, please give me the benefit of the doubt. I'm a tender man with a very sweet and compassionate heart who's done his inner work. Will you please receive me? The deeper a woman is willing to go into my depth and receive me, the more it may confront her stories about the collective masculine, and that's threatening.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. And distinguishing, I think, between this overarching, like, oh, the masculine, or like, well, the masculine's also too complicated, but even just like men, to like, well, but each person has an individual story and an individual experience. And again, it's easy, I think, for us as, I think the human mind, the ego, perhaps just likes things simple, it's like the more we can just make these overarching assumptions, like maybe the one that I made earlier about dating and guys' confidence, I'm not sure, but like, the more we can just go, okay, I can explain it because it's always like this. I find myself still till this day, and I'm doing so much work going like, sometimes I'll just say like, I'm like pissed off about, I don't know, like something like one guy on like Bumble did. And I'm just like, oh man. And the thing, and I've been working on really stopping myself from even having that thought, even if it's just be myself and I in my mind, because it is toxic, it is distorted, and it does really take away from the effort that so many men have been putting towards me, towards the women in their life. And so I think that it can be an easy trap to just be like, I'm just going to oversimplify, all men are dogs, or whatever someone might be thinking, and really take it like moment by moment and see, well, actually, how can this reprogram some of my broad strokes stories around this or that? So
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this has been so nourishing and inspiring for me, and I'm sure for all the people tuning in. So, if they want to find out more about your work, possibly um, read your story, where can they find all that?
Yeah, they can head to my website. It's seizeyoursword.com, SEIZE, yoursword.com, and subscribe there and go on the ride over the course of 9 days and read the story. And at any point, I always invite anyone. I'm old school. If you enjoyed this conversation and something struck a chord with you, shoot me a message on Facebook. Find my email when you subscribe. Like, please reach out. Like, forget about structures and the formal way of following rules and things like that. Like, just hit me up, please.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia.